folks, today we're talking about working with charts. Somehow the file that I thought I had posted here didn't make it up here. What is it? Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to find the file that we used when working with ranges. Here it is, census. So go back to September 14th and download Census Fall 16 XLSM. We're just going to pick up where we left off on that example. You remember that example? That's when we had the census data that was next to impossible to read, and we built a little tool that said pick the county. It'll bring in just the data that we need to be able to show there. So what we're going to do with that example is we are going to extend it to not only just show the data here. If you remember, let's go ahead and I'll just delete these and we'll just kind of review this. Maybe I'll get some Utah data. So I'm going to change this to get some counties in Utah. Where's Utah? I guess it's in the U's. URSTU. Here we go. Okay, so here's Davis County. Bring the data for Davis County. Let's bring in Tooele County. Yeah, is there a question? No? I'll just bring in 4. Then we'll bring in Utah County, our very own Utah County, and then we'll bring in Salt Lake County. It doesn't really matter which counties you have in here. It's just kind of nice to have some counties that at least I know something about because they're not too far from here. Salt Lake. Where's Salt Lake County? Okay, so it's nice now. I can compare these, but what I'd really like to do is I would like to be able to say, build a chart. You know, whichever line I'm on, I want to press Control-Shift-C and have it build me a chart that charts the status so I can take a look at it. And so that's what we're going to do. That's the task for today. Let's see if we can do it. Are you ready? Everyone, we've got the file ready to go?
Sorry, how did you get the Utah pulled up? Drop down box?
So, yeah, they're just in here. They're in here kind of grouped by state, but they're alphabetical within state. So you got to scroll down to the Utah section and then pick the county that you want. And really, it doesn't matter that you have the same counties that I have. You just got to have some counties there to chart. The ones that were there were fine, except we're finding anything interesting, so I don't know if it was in Kansas or something. I don't really know anything about the counties in Kansas. But at least here I can look at Salt Lake and say, okay, I got a sense for a little bit about the difference between Salt Lake County and Utah County. Up here, there are a bunch of liberal anti-Mormons, and here there are a bunch of righteous, conservative Mormons. Anyway. Okay, so that's the idea. So first of all, let's make a chart, kind of go through the process of making a chart. Then we're going to record ourselves making a chart, and then we're going to start modifying that code. So let's go ahead and select the data we're interested in. Why don't we do resident population under 5 years? Well, I'll highlight that line. I'll hold my control key down. I'm going to select a discontiguous range, and I'm going to highlight the labels that I want to go with those numbers. I've tried many ways to also highlight this label to have it show up as the title. I don't know how to do that, but we're going to code that, of course. Okay, so I've selected one set of numbers, and I've selected the labels. Discontiguous range, I'm going to insert a chart. I'm going to choose a column chart for this. And I'll just choose a very simple column chart. I have a fairly nice looking chart here. Okay, so I get it. There's a lot of kids under 5 in Salt Lake, not many in Utah County. There's just a few in Tooele. It's probably just because Tooele is a tiny place compared to these other places. Now, of course, I would probably also want to bring in like this label over here as my chart title. We'll do that through code. We're going to start off by recording ourselves building this chart. So first, we want to make sure you created that chart okay. If you're having trouble making that chart, now's the time to ask because we're about to build the code that does it. Anyone who's trying to work the example who's having trouble?
Just tell me point me in the right. Which tab is it?
Okay, so inserting the chart is on the Insert tab. And then, depending on your version, the chart kind of looks different, but maybe a column chart that you can choose. Pretty easy. Now, did anyone, in their chart, did anyone come up without a chart title? It doesn't say the word chart title, just nothing there. I think that's in 2010, Excel 2010, does that? Yours is like that? No chart title? Okay. Well, that's okay. I just need to make sure that if we've got some people like that, I'll address that when we get to the code. But let's not worry about it now. Okay, so let's go ahead and that chart. And let's start again. So I'm going to unselect my data because I want selecting that data to be part of what I'm doing in my macro. So I've unselected that. Let's start recording. I can start recording. So I'm going to come to my Developer tab, record a macro. I'm going to call it Insert Chart. For a shortcut key, I'm going to put a capital C. What would happen if I put a lowercase c? No, Control C, make a chart. That'd be really frustrating. I want to copy something that makes a chart. That's not good. I'm going to store it in this workbook and some description. Chart census. All right, I'm going to highlight the data that I'm after. I don't remember which ones it was. I'm percent of the population, that's right. Insert, column chart. I'm going to move it just once. I'm going to be careful just to grab the very corner of it. I'm just going to move it over here, kind of where I want it to go. Record myself moving the chart so we can see how that works. And then I'm going to stop. It turns out that the code that gets recorded when we record ourselves creating a chart is not especially intuitive about kind of what you have to do to work with it. But you're in luck. I'm going to take you by the virtual hand, and I'm going to walk you through what could otherwise be a painful process. All right, let's take a look at the code. Get count data history. Some kind of founding quotes. So let me kind of close anything else I've got open here. Founding quotes are going away. Save that. And I'm going to close hump res. Oh, that's why. I have module 1. What is all this stuff from? Yeah, remember, we wrote a bunch of code already in this workbook. So now we've got another module here, module 2, and that's where our newly recorded code is going to be. So let's do this. Since I got these 2 modules here, let me go ahead and name those because they're really for doing different things. So I'd like to be able to see that by name. So with module 1 selected, I'm just going to come down here to the properties window. If that properties window is not showing, your F4 key should bring that. Yeah. F4 will make that show up. So I've got module 1 selected, and I'm going to just change the name from module 1 to mod summarize. So it doesn't really summarize, it just kind of extracts some data. That's a fine name for it. And then module 2, I'm going to call this mod chart. So I've got a couple of modules here. My mod chart, now if I double click it, I should have the insert chart that I just recorded. It's not a whole lot of code. Insert chart macro. There's a keyboard shortcut for it. Okay. So first of all, we'll see that it recorded this range as a specific range. Now, do I want it to be a very specific range that's getting selected? I need this to be general, right? I want it to chart whatever line has or whatever row has the active cell on it. And here's the other problem. Even if I look at the kind of the labels up here, it's always going to start in B1. It's always going to end on row 2. But what column is it going to end on? It depends on how many counties I'm showing. So we're going to have to be a little bit more sophisticated about how we're doing this. So let's go ahead and start off by keeping track of a row that we're interested in and a column that we're interested in. The row is going to be the row that has the data. Column is going to be the column that ends, the last column that has the data. So let's just go ahead and declare a couple of those. What data type should I use for my row? A long. Yeah, I can get by with integer. I could probably get by with byte even. But just as a general rule, when you're using a row, use long because there are a long number of rows. You could end up, okay, column 32,000 will be enough for my column, so let me dim call as what data type? 32,000. Kind of the upper boundary for this data type. It's like, it's like Jeopardy, I'm giving you the answer. The upper boundary for this data type is 32,767. What is it? Integer. Again, both long and integer only take integer values. Just what's the range? Plus or minus 2 billion, plus or minus 32,000. Okay, so setting the row is a breeze. In fact, in-class exercise. Write the line that will set the row. Can you figure out how to get the? You're going to get an integer. What's going to be in this case? If I ran it right now, I would want row to equal 10. I mean, my active cell is on row 10. How are you going to make row? I'll get you started. Row equals. Okay, from there you're good. So what are you going to put there? Just take a minute and see. How many of you I totally got this. I can do this like from memory. Ah, okay. So maybe 10 or 20%. Okay. So how am I gonna refer to it? Somebody thinks they got it. Talk me through it. What are we gonna do? How are we gonna figure out what row number we're on? Go ahead.
Row equals active cell dot row.
Yeah, there's a way to refer to the range that's active. It's called active cell. You can yell at it. Active cell dot row, and then I can ask for the row. Anytime I've got a single cell range, I can just ask what the row is. And there we'll have it. So that sets the row. Now, getting the column is going to be a little more difficult. Someone talk me through, how am I going to figure out which column we're charting? Yeah, in the back.
Would you want to just start with B and then move over until there's no more data in the column?
Yeah, we could just start with B and then move over until we're out of data. Here's the problem with it. What happens if the only data I have is B? If I start with B and then do like a control right arrow, I'll simulate that by being like E. And do a control right arrow, where's it going to go? All the way. Now, all the way to the end. That's going to be a problem if I say that's like 16,000 columns. So that would be a problem. But why would I be trying to chart just one anyway? That doesn't make sense. It would give me one bar. So it's not a bad thing, but the user could kind of mess things up here. So there's a couple of options that we could do. One is we could start way out here and just come this way. That's actually my preferred way. Or we could kind of, the fact we're going to have a number here in A, and so, or in column A. So if we go here and then do a right arrow, even if there's only one county showing, it would end right on that one. But I actually prefer this one where we start way out here and then come back. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's do this. Call equals, ooh, we better make sure we're on the right sheet. Before I do any of this, let's make sure that our sheet is the active sheet. The sheet is called compare, so let's just go ahead and do that. Sheets, and then we'll go with the name of the sheet, compare dot activate. So that will make that the active sheet. So now I know that my compare sheet is active, so I can just use the cells method without identifying the sheet. Because when I just say cells, I don't tell it which sheet, it assumes the active sheet. So cells, which row do I want? Row number 1. Which column do I want? I want the column that's all the way at the right. A couple ways I can do that. One is I can look at XFD. I think that would work. I can put in quotes right here. XFD. That's the cell I'm interested in. From there, I want to say end XL to left. That is going to refer to whichever cell I would bump into if I was out here and hit control left arrow. I want the column of that cell. And so I can just ask for the column. Go ahead.
Do you want to start on row number 1 since row number 1 is the titles?
So the question is, do I want to be starting on row number 1? And the answer is yes. I want to be here on row number 1 because all I'm trying to do at this point is I'm trying to figure out how wide my data, how many columns I've got of data. I'm trying to figure out what's the last column that I need to be selecting. Actually, that's pretty good unless I have added in like the whole state of Utah. Because I think, I'm not sure what happens when I say the state of Utah, but we probably should check on that. Yeah, that's a problem because when I take the state of Utah, that one's blank. So maybe instead of the first row, which row should I use? Probably should use the second row. That's probably a little safer. I'm going to get rid of the state of Utah because I don't really want it there. But I would like to anticipate this because maybe someone wants to compare Utah to Alabama for some reason. So control minus that. let's make that modification. So instead of looking at row 1, let's look at row 2. I really didn't mean row 1, but I think row 2 is a better one. So thanks for asking. Question?
Yeah, what does the dot end mean? What does that syntax signify?
Okay, so the dot end is like it's a method. First of all, end is I'm not entirely sure if it's a method or property. I can sell dot end. It's a property. So end is a property of a range. And so I can say, I'm referring to some cell, then I can say end, and then I can tell it a direction to go, up, down, left, or right. And what it does is it does the same thing as if you were here in the worksheet and you held control down, or you hit the control key down, hit down arrow, you're going to you're finding a cell based on contiguous data, or contiguous blank space, taking all the way to the bottom of it. And so, yeah, that's what that is. Why do they use the word end? The reason they use the word end is because back before the control key was invented, it's not really before the control key was invented, but before we were using the control key for this, we did this with a 2-keystroke sequence. It still works today. If you hit the end key on your keyboard, end, and then the down arrow, it does the same thing. It's a 2-stroke sequence. The problem with the end key anymore is that who knows where their end key is? I mean, if you had a 101 keyboard, it's always in the same place. It's kind of standard. But end key kind of moves around on your laptop. And so I think that's when they said, we've got to have a better, kind of more standard way to go that navigation. And so that's when they added the control key to these things. But the language, it had already been named end. And so that's what that is. So what you have to realize is that when I say end, it doesn't select the cell, it only refers to it. And so I'm never selecting this cell, I'm just hey, think about this cell. I'm talking about this cell. Use the end property of that cell, and I'm not selecting that one either. I'm just thinking about it. That identifies a cell, and all I'm doing is asking for the column. Okay? Okay, so now I have a row and a column, so let's go ahead and modify this line here to select the correct range. Now, this is a discontiguous range. So if we look at it here, we've got B1 to E2. What is this selecting? Yeah, this is the titles, and then here's my data right here. And so, I have a couple of ways that I could do this. This is a string. I could manipulate this string so that based on row and column, it brings in the right information. Row would be pretty easy. Everywhere I have a 10, I would just have to concatenate in the value of row. The column number, though, however, right here, this E that has to go both here and here, that's a little more difficult. How am I going to convert my column number into a column letter? Is there a way I can just ask for the column letter of the column? Oh, that would be easy. I don't think there's a way. How do you do that? There's no column letter here. Well, you know what? From A to Z, I could figure that out pretty well. That would work okay because I know that I could adjust that. But as soon as I get to column A, I'm in trouble. That'd be a heck of a chart, too, all the way up to column AA. So I might be able to get by with that solution. But let's try a different approach. This will also kind of help us as we're dealing with looking at working with ranges. So let's do this as 2 separate ranges. Let's just do the first range, and then we'll do the second range. We can do 2 discontiguous ranges. We'll do them kind of together. So let's take the first one. So range. Now, one way to refer to a range is by giving it, to refer to a contiguous range is by giving it what? I can give it 2 different ranges. I give it 2 different cells, and we'll just take everything between it. Okay, so, well, I've got 1 cells. In fact, this one's always the same. It's always going to start where? Row number 1, column number 2. This always starts right here. So I can just say, actually, before I write this in, let me kind of put in the syntax here. Range. There's going to be a comma and a closing parenthesis. I've got to have now 2. I've got to reference 2 cells in here. Here's the first one. Cells, row number 1, column number 2. That's the first one. And then the second one is cells, row number 2, column number column. So now I'm specifying this range by giving a contiguous range by giving it an upper left-hand corner and a bottom right-hand corner. And it doesn't like that because I'm not doing anything with it, just identifying the range. So we've still got some more work to do with this, but that's going to identify my first range. Now, my second range, I'll just do it on a simple line. My second range is going to be similar. Range. That's so similar, I'm going to copy this line. Now, it's still going to start. It's always going to start in column number 2, but which row is it going to start on? Row number? Row, yeah. Whichever row I figured out from looking at the active cell. And so same thing. It's going to end on the same column, start on the same column, but we're now looking at row number row. So I now have 2 ranges. The VBA interpreter is still confused by what I've written so far, right? It just said, I said range. I'm telling it range. It doesn't know what I'm trying to do with it. So I'm not quite there yet. But now, what if I want to take these 2 discontiguous ranges and make one range out of, I don't want to take everything between them. I want one discontiguous range that has, defined here, the first range and the second range. Any thoughts? We mentioned it like 2 weeks ago, briefly, in passing. You didn't remember you're not hanging on every word and memorizing everything. Probably not. Here's how you do it. Union. Open parentheses. You can put like up to 30 in one stroke. I'm going to be okay with just 2. So I'm going to union my first range here, comma, I'll bring in my second range, close parentheses. And then I will say select. Now it likes the syntax. That's kind of an ugly row. So I'm going to highlight that. So there's the first range. This is the range that we built first. This is my labels. And I'm going to union that range together with my actual data. That will give me a discontiguous range, and it will select. With that data selected, when I build the chart, it's going to say, okay, I know what chart to build. Build the chart with this data. How are we doing on this, folks? Some of you are going, that's a really ugly line, but I think I followed it. All right, so this whole select and activate, we don't have to worry about this. Go ahead and select it. Now, let's look at this next one. Here's where the magic happens. Active sheet, I'm on a particular sheet, referring to the shapes collection. This is the collection of all the shapes that I have on the sheet. But look at the sheet right now. How many shapes do I have on it? What do you think? There are 2. There's this chart is in a shape. We'll talk about that more specifically in a minute. And this drop down is a shape as well. So right now there's 2. And we are going to add a new shape. We're going to call not just the add method, but the add chart to method. Does anyone just have the add chart method here? It was 2007 had add chart. 2010 they brought in add chart 2, which just had a little bit different syntax. We tell it 201. What does 201 mean? I can't remember what 201 means. We have to look up what add chart 2 does. That's okay, we can do that. F1. It's going to be some parameter that tells us something about, it's called the style. Style is optional. -1 to get the default style. Apparently it has nothing to do with the style. So that probably is saying it's just a column chart. That's what this says, Excel column cluster. What's the second one? Chart type. The type of the chart. One's the style, one's the type. I don't know what the options are for style, but this creates the kind of chart that we record ourselves creating. And then it creates it and then selects it. This seems strange, folks. Let's understand this. What is this? Method or property? Let's talk through these. What is this? Property, object, what? It's an object. That's a sheet. It turns out it's actually also a property. You wouldn't know it, but we can say this workbook. So this workbook is an object. It has a property of it, which is the active sheet of it. So this is both a property and an object. Now what's this? Object, property, what? It's an object. You can tell it's not. If it has a dot after it, it's an object. It evaluates to an object. And so it could, anyway, it's a particular property referred to as a collection. It just holds references to other objects. What about this one? Add chart to. Property or method? It's a method. What's the difference between a property and a method? The method does something. Property just gives you back a value. The method does something. Might not be all that apparent what a method does in some cases, but in this case, it's creating a chart. This is definitely a method. Now, here's the weird part. So this is an instruction. We're telling it to do something. How can we say dot select after it? What does that mean? It means that this method is creating an object, and it's returning a reference to the object it just created. So everything right up to here will evaluate to, it will refer to the newly created chart. Well, the newly created object, whatever this creates. It turns out it's not referring to a chart. What's it referring to? Here's a clue. What's the shape that it's creating? What's the shape we're working with, the collection? It's shapes. It's a collection of shapes. And so this is going to refer to not the chart. Is there even a chart object? Yes, there is. This is the weird part. The thing says add chart. Does it add a chart? It does. But it adds a chart, and it puts that chart into a shape. It makes a shape, and it makes a chart. And it returns a reference to the shape that contains the chart. This is the weird part. And then it selects that and makes that the active shape. We're going to break this down. Okay? So let's go ahead and declare a couple of variables up here. I'm going to dim something. I'm going to dim something called SHP as a shape. I'll dim something else called CHRT as a chart. So these are both object variables. Remember, an object variable it just allocates enough memory for me to be able to store the location of some other object out there. But this isn't really going to be a chart. It's just going to be a way for me to refer to a chart. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get rid of this workbook. It doesn't need to be there. I'm just kind of giving it as an example. It would be just fine if it was there. And I'm going to say set my shape, SHP, equal to this whole thing, right up to and not including the dot select. This add chart creates the chart and it creates a shape. It puts the chart inside the shape and then it returns a reference to the shape. And so I'm going to remember the shape that just got created with this variable. That's what I'm doing. I'm saying let this thing get created, and then instead of selecting it, let's just remember it. We're going to bind this object onto it. Guy in the tie, not you. The one right behind you.
So why do we have to put select and then shape equal?
Aha!
We just say the variable equal.
Why do we have to say set for crying out loud? Can't we just ignore set and just say shape equals? And the answer is no, we can't do it. Darn it. We have to use the keyword set. Anytime we are binding an object variable onto an object, we have to say the keyword set. Here's why. The reason is, the whole philosophy of VBA is we want to make this accessible to demigods. We don't want you to have to be a full-fledged god to work with this thing. We want you to be almost a god, but not quite there, and still be able to understand it. Maybe not even understand it, just still be able to work with it. That's the reason that I can ask for something like this. I can say print the active cell. It does not make any sense to say print the active. How am I going to print the cell? The cell is this huge, complex object. It's got a property. It's got a formula, and it's got a background color. It's got a font. It's this huge thing. So when I say print active cell, what is it doing? VBA is saying, you poor, sorry programmer. You have no idea what you're talking about. You probably mean the value. Property. Objects have a default property. And so if I don't specify a property, do something that doesn't make any sense, it goes, it must mean the property. So what if I had, what if this, I was trying to bind the object on, but I was using a range instead here. If I didn't say set, it wouldn't know I'm trying to make the connection to the object. It would return the value of its default property. And so what it says is, listen, if you ever get to the level where you're binding object variables onto objects, you're going to have to learn the syntax to do it. We're not going to guess at it. We're going to guess for my mom. Good heavens. If my mom ever came here and tried to do this, they're going to guess on her. My mom's not going to ever do this. She might do something like this, and they're going to guess. She wouldn't ever really get this far even, but that's okay. I love you, Mom, in case you're watching this recording. Where am I? Okay, so here. So yeah, and it's just a thing that you just have to say, listen, if I'm going to bind an object variable onto an object, I have to say the keyword set. And the reason is because this notion of a default property, which can be confusing. All right. So now let's also set my chart equal to, now that shape actually has a chart in it. There's a chart property. And so this one is going to remember the shape, or get a reference to the shape. And this one is going to get a reference to the chart. So now if I have to move, if I have to do something that I want to modify the shape, I've got a direct handle to it. If I've got to do something where I have to modify the chart, I've got a direct handle to it. I don't think we have to do anything with the chart. I hope so. That was a lot of work. Okay. Incidentally, so the shape, I modify the shape if I want to change the position or the size of this chart. Because making the shape wider, the chart is going to automatically fill up how big the shape is. But if I want to change some property of the chart, then I have to work with the chart on it. I'm not even sure we're going to do anything with the chart. Oh yeah, because we got the title. We definitely need a reference to the chart. Okay. So it turns out this next line right here, we've got the line continuation character. Let me go ahead and bring it up onto one line. This line is just saying, hey, let's set the source range for this. This is going to be the source data. We can actually code that in, but it turns out that when you create the chart and you've got the data selected, it's actually going to use that data for the chart. It's going to set that range automatically for us. And so we can actually get rid of this line altogether. Now, these last two are just me changing, where that chart is located. Well, I was hoping to record it a little bit differently. So here's what we're going to do: is I'm just going to use my shape object to position that chart. shp.left. I'm going to set that equal to something. Where do I want this chart to go? Just talk to me in terms of the spreadsheet. Don't talk to me in VBA lingo. Just tell me, if you're trying to explain to me where should this chart go. What, is this a good place? Where do we want it? What column should it be in? Should it be in column F? Or maybe G? Or maybe, a little bit into column F. And how about the top? Where should the top be? Yeah, probably right about there. Let's do this, folks. We can ask it, where does column F start? Pretty easy. And it turns out the very top is 0. So we just got to go up from there. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and set ourselves a constant. I'm going to come up here before my variables. I'm going to declare a constant. Someone tell me what a constant is. Or somebody tell me what a constant is like. A constant is really, it's really like something else. It is so very similar to a variable. Yeah, it's almost exactly the same as a variable. It's a nickname for a location in memory that has a value. What's the difference between a constant and a variable? Yeah, on the constant, once I set the value, I can't change it after that. So right on the declaration line, I give it a value, margin equals 5. So const margin equals 5. And so now I'm going to use that because I'm going to use this value to kind of get the spacing done for my charts. And if I decide, I need a little more spacing, no problem. I'll come in here and just change this margin to 10, and now all my margin spacing will change. So my left is going to be, let's first figure out what that column is. So how do I get to column F? How do I figure out what column F is? Column F is the one I'm after. I can say columns, and then what? Column number 1 is A, column number 2 is B, and so forth. How do I get to column F in this case? Well, yeah, but I don't always want to go on column F. I want column F when I've got four counties showing. Col plus 1, because col tells me col is going to be E, column E here. I want the next one. And so column's number col plus 1. That's going to refer to that column, and it has a left property of its own. And so I'm going to set the left of my shape equal to the left of one column past my data plus my margin. And let's set the top as well. shp.top. equals margin. That should do it for us, folks. I mean, we're not done with the example, for crying out loud. Oh, I'll get rid of these other two lines that we're moving the chart. So we're doing okay here. We activate the sheet. We figure out which row and what's the relevant row and column. We use the row and column to figure out what data we want to have selected. We build the chart. It'll read whatever data are selected, and then we're set the position of it. We still got to work with the title. There's a bunch we have to do still in this example. We got to get the title set. We got to make it so we make two charts. They don't sit on top of each other and so forth. So let's go ahead and see if we got this part working. I'm going to select my one chart that I have here and delete it. And then I'm going to come and choose this one, I guess, resident population. Let's do this one that starts with 29, whatever one this is. Row number 12. 29.5. I'll go so we get the right one. And then Control-Shift-C. Should generate that chart and then put it kind of right over there. Looks right. A little bit more than 29. I got 29.5. Very good shape. Code is happy. If your code is not happy, now's the time. Camera is itching to come and help you with the code. If you got this working, like look at me with this really smug look on your face, like totally satisfied. Kind of hard to see your smug looks in moonlight. If you need help, raise your hand. Now it's time. A couple of, all right, let's go ahead and pause. Oh, you just changed the add chart? All right, so one thing that kind of came up here as we were helping some students, that if you're on Excel 2010, let's know about add chart 2. Apparently, if you just change that to add chart, it will still do what needs to be done. Okay, so this is working pretty well. That's good. But now the problem is, if we're going to add the next chart, where's it going to go? Right over the top. Where do we want it to go? Probably right below it. And actually, before we get to that, let's go ahead and get the title set. All right, so let's do this. First of all, again, I think if you're on 2010, you probably don't have a title showing. So let's do this. We've got the chart right here. We'll put the title in right here. So your chart object, CHRT dot, it has a property called hasTitle. It's a Boolean property. You can just set that to true. And so if this runs on an Excel 2010 workbook, it probably wouldn't work because of this. But anyway, in 2013 or 2016, it automatically comes up with a title. But this is just kind of make sure that it's there. Now that it's there, we can go ahead and set the title's value. Okay, CHRT dot, can you find the property that has the chart's title? Take a look. What would it be? Title, I don't know. You could look along. If you're like me, you might look a long time before you found out the chart's title is actually called chart title, not title. You know, in case it might be the title of something else, we wanted to make sure you knew that this was the title of the chart. So great, chart title equals what? What do you want to put in there? Nothing, because that's not the property you're after. Hit a dot. Oh, there's something else. Okay, so it's an object. Which of these do you think is the one we're going to have to modify? Aha! Oh, I never noticed the caption before. That might do it. Let's try it. Chart title dot caption. I've always modified the characters. Let's give the caption a shot. Caption. I hit dot, nothing else comes up. That might be the last one. So I'm just going to right now test it. My new title. I haven't ever tried the caption property. It sounds like a pretty good one. I'm going to go ahead and come back here and run it. Control-Shift-C. Oh yeah, caption works just fine. Perfect. So that's going to allow me to set that title. Now I don't want to, of course, set it to that. What do I want to set it to? Cells, row number, column number, 1. And so now when I run this, Control-Shift-C, it will bring in 282. Because I was on column number 1. I don't want to do that. Control-Shift-C. Now it brings the title of the chart off of the name of the variable that we're looking at. We have a chart. There's a question here in the back? No? And so that's going to set the title of the chart equal to the label that we've got on the row for the day. Question?
So there's no difference between text and caption?
No difference between text and caption. Is there a text choice in there as well?
Yeah, I didn't text in the word.
Worked just fine. Yeah, no, yeah. You can kind of go character by character. You could say characters, text. I don't think name would do it. Anyway, caption's working for us, so we're going to stick with it. I don't know the difference between caption and text. All right. Now it gets a little more difficult, because now we can't just drop this in the same place. In fact, I've got a bunch of them here. You know what might be handy for us before we go too much further? Because we're going to be kind of creating multiple charts, it might be a good idea if we had a method that would just get rid of all the charts off this work. Let's do that. Let's create a sub-procedure just called delete charts. It turns out deleting objects can be a little bit frustrating the first time you go after it. So, what would be one thought? How do I delete these objects? I could just make a for loop, or I could use a for each loop. For each shape in this collection of shapes on this sheet, just if it's a chart, delete it. Here's the problem. As soon as I start deleting elements out of that shape collection, that for each loop is going to get confused. Similar problem if we do it this way. Let's do it with a for each loop. Dim x as an integer. For x equals 1, 2, active sheet, dot shapes, dot count. So now x is going to change to a different value each time this runs. Shapes is a collection. I can refer to members of the collection by a numeric index. If shape sub x has a chart, then what I want to do is just delete it. There's a problem with this code, though.
It's only going to delete the shapes.
What's that?
It's only going to delete the shapes on the charts.
Oh, the question is, you're going to delete the shapes and leave the chart behind. Oh, no. You got a shape with a chart in it, you delete the shape, the chart's got nowhere else to go but oblivion. It's gone. It's not going to sit around anymore. So we're going to delete the shape. Let's think about what happens.
Is the shape dot count? Does the count change since you delete it?
Here's the question. Does the count change when I delete it? Yes, it does, but the for next loop evaluates this once. It finds out what this number is. Like I have 4 charts up there right now, 5 shapes because I've got that drop-down box. And so this x is equal 1 to 5. It's going to check the first one. Shape sub x. Does it have a chart? No. We move on. X is now 2. Shape sub 2. Does it have a chart? Yeah. Delete it. Now I'm going to go on to shape sub 3. At this point, what is shape sub 2? It's the chart that used to be shape sub 3. Because I deleted the number 2 out, and shape's now different, everything slides in, and ultimately I'm going to try to get too far up here because by the time I get out here, I'm not going to have 5 shapes to go to anymore. I'll delete every other one, and then I'll crash because I got too far. So there's a nice little trick here. You ready? Instead of starting at 1 and going there, we're going to start at the top, and we're going to go to 1. Now, trouble is, next does what? Next adds 1 to that variable, unless I tell it a different quantity to add. Step -1. Now, when I hit next, instead of counting up, it's going to count down. It's going to add -1 to my variable each time I get there. So now it's going to delete off the 5th element, and then it's going to look at the 4th element. It's still going to be the last element. That'll be the new last one, but that's okay. And so now we should be able to run that, and it should just delete off those charts. I'll run that. And now the charts are gone. My combo box is still here. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. So indeed, deleting objects can be a little bit tricky the first time you encounter it until you learn this neat little trick using a for next loop and then counting backwards through the set to delete the ones you want. That really wasn't part of the problem we were solving. That's just to make our lives a little bit easier so that we didn't have to kind of keep deleting these shapes to make them go where we want them to go. Next step is we've got to figure out, is there already a chart on this page? Because if there's no chart on the page, we want it to go right here. If there is a chart on the page, we want to refer to that. A couple ways we can do this. It's kind of an easy way I just thought of. I think it'll work. Let's do this. Let's create a new variable. I'm going to call this stem. I'm going to call it last shape. I'm not sure that's the best name for it. Give it a little more time. I might come up with a better one. That's going to be another shape object. So I know something about the structure of this sheet. Number one, I'm always going to have, unless something terrible has happened, I'm always going to have at least one shape because that combo box is a shape. And so I should be able to say, when I very first come onto this, let's go ahead and activate our sheet. And now let's bind our last shape onto the last shape. However many shapes there are, I want to bind it to it. So let's set last shape equal to active sheet dot shapes. Which one do I want? Well, however many there are. How can I can ask. Every collection I can ask. Active sheet dot shapes dot count. All right, I've got to put a number here. I've got to tell it which shape I want. Which one do I want? Well, if there are 12, I want the 12th one. If there's one, I want the first one. I want the 1st one. And this will tell me how many there are. Okay, so now I've got my last shape object bound onto whatever the most recently added shape was to this. It will either be a chart or it won't be a chart. If it's a chart, I'm going to use that as a reference point to figure out where I want to put my next chart. If it's not a chart, if there's no chart in that shape, then I want to do exactly what we've done. Exactly what we've done here before. So here's where we're setting the top. So we'll do it right here. If last shape dot has chart, then we'll do something. Otherwise, we'll behave as we did in the past. So if there's no charts on the sheet, then last shape is going to bind on that combo box. That combo box does not have a chart. Oops. That's right. The combo box does not have a chart, which means has chart will be false. And so I will drop to this part of the code and execute this. If there is a chart in it, I want to do something else to figure out where to put the thing. In fact, to abstract this code just a little bit, to make the code go a little bit cleaner, I'm going to create a couple of more interim variables. I'm going to create a top and a left. They're local variables. And let's make the code go a little bit better for me. Let me dim top as a single precision floating point number. And I'll dim left as a single precision floating point. It turns out, when I'm positioning things, it's not going to be integers. It'll be 4.5 or whatever. So now, I've just declared those two variables, top and left. So now, let me just set my variables to be that here. And then after the if, I'm going to set the shapes left equal to my local variable left. Ooh, is it okay to have a variable the same name as a property of a shape? Yeah, not a problem. So here, I'm just setting this variable left and top to what we talked about before. And then afterwards, I'm using that variable to set the left property of my shape or to set the top property of the shape. You see it? This is a little bit cleaner because now all this if block is going to do is it's going to figure out what top and left should be, and then down here we're actually going to modify our shape. So how do we figure out what the left should be if my last shape has a chart in it? The most recently added shape is a chart. How are we going to figure out what the left should be? Think about it. If I've got a chart up here, yeah, it should be exactly the same as the one before. So here, I'm just going to say that my local variable left is going to be equal to last shape, SHA, dot left. Now, what's the top going to be? Yeah, maybe last shape dot bottom. Last shape dot EO. Bottom right cell. Okay, bottom right cell. There's no bottom property. I tricked you. There's a top property, and there's a height property. And so, it'd be nice if there was a bottom property, but there's not. So I said top, add on to that the height of the shape, and then add on what? The margin. That should be pretty slick. So now, as we add multiple charts, we should go right below each other. The only thing that would make this slicker is that after I added a chart, if I would move my active cell like to the next label down, so I just press Control-C and would lay in all the charts, or just Control-C, 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 lay those charts in. Well, that's pretty easy. So I'm very done here. Let's just activate a different cell. Cells. The cell I want row +1. Which column doesn't matter. Column 1 should do. Dot activate. And all this is doing is making it so I can hit Control-C multiple times. It'll give me different choices. Let's give it a shot. I like it. I'm going to start right here on the resident population. Control-Shift-C. I got a chart. Control-Shift-C. I get another chart. And it just puts them all right in there. That's so very nice. Actually, folks, at this point, if I was to take this chart and drag it to a new location, or delete it and then recreate it and put it over here. Oops. Okay, move. I want to bring this to a second column. If I just take this most recently added chart and put it here, this is my most recently added chart, right? My code is now going to find this chart as the most recently added chart. The next time I press Control-Shift-C, where's the next chart going to go? It'll go right here. Because I'm telling it to go the same left as the last chart, and then a margin space down below. The only thing I'd like to do is I'd like to have it go automatically over after I put 5 or 6 charts in. I want it to automatically go and start the next column. Can I do that in 2 minutes? Yeah, it's really pretty easy. Let's take a look. I'm going to need another constant here. I'll call it charts per column. Charts per column. Let's make that 5. Dim, or not dim, but constant. I've got a constant here. I'm saying, listen, I only want, after you've got 5 charts, then time to start a new column. I don't want to keep going down forever. Have a new column. So in this case, I only have to worry about this when my last shape has a chart. My left, so it's going to be different. So both of these are going to be different depending on if I've hit that 5th chart. Oh, you know what? To do this, I'm going to have to know how many. Okay, so everything's still fudged. Okay. So let's do this. Let's have an if statement here. If active sheet dot shapes dot count. Yeah, you'll see it here in a second, but I created that variable const charts per column. Wish we could see all of this. All right, what does this number tell me? Based on what we know about this particular worksheet that we're working on, what's the English word for what I have highlighted right here? That is the number of charts. That's the number of charts I have on. So, because -1, because I've got one extra shape on it that's not a chart. So if my number of charts mod charts per call equals 0, then I'm going to behave one way, otherwise I'll behave another way. Otherwise is I will behave the way I used to behave. Right? So at that moment where I get to where the remainder of the total number of charts divided by how many charts are allowed in the column is 0, that means I've filled that up. I fill that. If I've got 5 charts, and charts per column is 5, charts per column mod 5 is 0. And so in this case, what's my top going to be? Top's just going to be margin. I got to go right back up to the top. Left now is going to be equal to last shape's left plus last shape's width plus the margin. And that should do it. We'll test it, and I'll put the code back up, and then we'll call it a day. So now, I'm going to clear my charts off, delete charts, Control-Shift-C. Oh, it didn't work. Darn it, I'll fix it. I'm not sure I got it wrong here. But I'll fix it, and then we'll take a look. I pause if I can see where my recording is. Okay, so it was a couple of things that we had in trouble. First of all, mod has precedence for order of operations, and so we've got to make sure that we modify our active shape separately from the model. And the second thing is we had to subtract 2, not 1, because by the time we get here, we've already added on the new chart that we're trying to decide where it goes. And so this is the line that's going to get us to position that chart where we want it to go. So let's go ahead and run it and see what it looks like. Zoomed out here so we can see the charts going. Control-Shift-C. These are the first one, second, third, fourth, fifth. Now we should advance to the next column.